Chag Sameach. On this first day of Shavuot, this beautiful spring holiday, I'm tempted to remind myself again of how mysterious is the Creator. There is so much to say about Shavuot, this tiny little holiday that just begs to be explored and mined and plumbed for its depths. But a word that always draws me back is a word in Hebrew that we call devekut, or binding. It gives rise to the modern Hebrew word devek, or glue. But I've talked a little bit about devekut before, and I was wandering down some other paths. And then yesterday, I sat with a friend whose mother has passed away this week. People I've known for many, many years, so it's a personal loss. And I sat with my friend and her father, a dear man, an articulate man, whose speech has been impaired by a stroke in these last many years. And I said, Jonah, tell me a word that describes your beloved Audrey. And my hand to God, he said, glue. Glue. Well, at that point, the topic for this little drash was set. Audrey was the glue that held that beautiful family together, and she will continue to be the glue that holds them together as they remember her. Audrey provided an opportunity for that family to bond, to be bound tightly together in a sense of devekut. What is devekut? In Hebrew, we translate it actually into English as cleavage, which it's a rare occurrence where the English word actually might be more redolent of meaning than the Hebrew. In English, when we hear the word cleavage, we think, wait a minute, doesn't that mean one thing and its opposite? Yes, it's a strange quirk of English that some words do mean themselves and the opposite. We think of cleaving as sticking together, but cleavage as also a cutting, a rending in two. Shavuot is a perfect time to think about devekut. It makes just a few amazing appearances in the Torah. It's a very rare word. The first among them is in Genesis 2:24. Thus a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife, so that they become one flesh. V'davak be'ishto. In Deuteronomy 11:22, military might and territorial conquest is promised to the Israelites if you faithfully keep all my commandments, loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and holding fast to him. Ulidovka bo. But my absolute favorite is in Deuteronomy 4:4. It's the verse that we say, and it flies by sometimes much too quickly before we start to read the Torah. Ve'atem hadvekim b'Adonai chayim kulchem hayom. But you, the ones who cling to the Lord your God, you are alive today. In the tiny, magnificent book of Ruth, the root dalid vet kuf explodes off the page in a few spectacular passages that to me anchor this book to this Shavuot holiday. Chapter 1, verse 14 describes the tearful scene between Naomi and her daughters-in-law. Vatishak orpa lachamota verut dovka ba. Orpah kissed her mother-in-law farewell, but Ruth cleaved to her. Once Ruth pledges her loyalty to Naomi, her land, her people, and her God, they return to Bethlehem, where Ruth gains favor from Naomi's kinsman Boaz, and he tells her, Vecho tidbakin im na'arotav. Stay here, cleave to my reaping girls, and there you will be protected. In the relaying of Ruth's glue-like adherence to this new people that will be hers, the word tidbak appears twice more, and the rest of the story unfolds to its happy destiny and the siring of the line that will produce King David. I'm going to return to Ruth in a moment, but I want to stop to think for a moment about what it means to cleave, to stick like glue to God. In Ruth, the devekut is between people, creating a family and ties that bind a community. And in fact, that's generally how the rabbis regarded it, but with a little twist, of course. Rabbi Elazar points out in Masechet Ketubot, how is it possible for a human being to be attached to the divine presence when it is written in Deuteronomy, "For Adonai your God, he is a consuming fire"? That's Deuteronomy 4:24. Can a person attach himself to fire? Says Rabbi Elazar. This is to teach you that one who marries his daughter to a Torah scholar, or helps a Torah scholar in business, or shares his property with a scholar, is looked upon by God as attached to God's own self. Rabbinically speaking, then, engaging closely with a person of scholarly renown was considered a path to devekut, since Torah is revered by the Jewish people as the most open channel to the divine. The Kabbalists, the mystics, took devekut to deeply spiritual places, acknowledging the need to transcend the terrifying but tantalizing threshold that stands between where we are and where we might hope to be. Gershom Scholem, the father of all modern Kabbalists, quotes the teachings of the 14th century Rabbi Joseph ben Shalom of Barcelona, who said, "In every transformation of reality, in every change of form, or every time the status of a thing is altered, the abyss of nothingness is crossed and for a fleeting moment becomes visible. Nothing can change without coming into contact with this region of pure, absolute being, which the mystics call Ein Sof, without end." Now, I must admit that I find that idea frightening. I'm not at all sure exactly how to do this, but I sense that trying to come up with a path and a plan for experiencing devekut may be what helps us survive as a people and as a species. Now, I explored this topic several years ago, and I said then, this has got to take place here and now. How much more portentous are those words for us today? Rabbi Chaim Ibn Ater looks to the example of Nadav and Avihu, Aaron's alien fire offering sons, who we explored a number of weeks ago in Leviticus chapter 10. They paid for that act with their lives, but he saw there a kind of redemption for them, explaining that in their zeal to achieve devekut with God, they actually did just that. But he sees there a stern warning. Such a cleaving to God is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing while we live. Our job is not to ascend unnaturally to God, but rather to bring the divine closer to us here in this world under the sun. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov is often looked to as the embodiment of mystical and devotional techniques, many of which we might incorporate in our task of coming close to God. He introduced the meditative practice of hitbodedut, being alone, but alone with God. Even hand clapping during prayer to create sparks of energy and awaken the spirit. He offers as the goal of these practices to lead the participant to a state of bitul, self-annulment, and devekut, cleaving to God. Now, hand clapping during prayer to achieve union with the divine, as Tevye said, sounds crazy, no? But there's a lot to Rabbi Nachman's reminding us about self-annulment and the need to enliven and rouse the soul. With this idea of cleavage as meaning one thing and its opposite, we think and we know that in order to cling to something, to cleave to it, by definition, we have to leave something else. And that's really hard. Usually we talk about leaving anger, resentment, fears, ego behind, things that leave us mired in destructive habits with hearts that are just a couple of sizes too small. When we strive for devekut, we are left vulnerable, teetering on that incredible abyss. But it invites us to take a leap, to embrace the other, to embrace ourselves, and have faith that by holding hands, cleaving to one another for common good, we help heal this weary world just a little bit. It's important, it's appropriate, it is right, and it is now to ask ourselves, to what do we cleave? And from what must we be cleaved? This is a time of rending, a time where we have been torn, we have been cleaved away from the life that we knew. Everything, so much, small things, the biggest and the tiniest, are different than they were 11 weeks ago. Whether we intended it or not, and we did not intend it, we have been torn from the life that we knew. And now we must cleave to something new. What were we torn away from? Some things that were maybe unhealthy for us, and many, many things that we loved and were good for us, many of which we still cannot have and will not have for the foreseeable future. But in this crossing over of the abyss, of the divide, we have to take care not to look down too much, but to look up and to look forward. There are new things to which we can cleave, things within ourselves, with one another, and with the larger world that we can and must stick like glue to so that we can make sure that we continue to walk together. I'm going to close this little Shavuot Drash with a poem by a contemporary artist. His name is David White, and the poem is called Cleave. To hold together and to split apart at one and the same time, like the shock of being born, breathing in this world while lamenting for the one we've left. No one needs to tell us we are already on our onward way. No one has to remind us of our everyday and intimate embrace with disappearance. We were born saying goodbye to what we love. We were born in a beautiful reluctance, not quite ready to breathe in this new world. We are here and we are not. We are present while still not wanting to admit we have arrived. Not quite arrived in our minds, yet always arriving in the body. Always growing older while trying to grow younger. Always in the act of catching up, of saying hello, of saying goodbye. Finding strangely in each new and imagined future the still lived memory of a previous precious life. May we cling to one another. May we cling to the Creator for good, for health, and for healing. Chag Sameach.